Discover the amazing morning routine to feel incredibly energized and focused every day. Sarah's phone pinged, the notification methodically drilling into her tired psyche. She barely managed to grab the screen in time to see the caption flourish: "Reclaim your energy. Become the best version of yourself." But how could she possibly become anything more than what she was: a fatigued nurse battling endless shifts, a single mother barely keeping her head above water? The chaos of her life felt like a raging river, threatening to drown her at any moment. After another soul-crushing day filled with sharp critiques from her boss, the former physician-turned-corporate knight, she felt more like a punching bag than a pillar of hope for her patients. In the fragile evenings, her children flitted about, exuberant and charming, yet demanding. Home-cooked meals, homework battles, bedtime stories, all dictated by her clock. The shift inevitably left her fraying at the edges. Just how much longer could she endure? Guilt clung to her like a wet blanket. Each defeat at work mirrored her fears. Was she failing them too? She slumped down onto her bed that chilly morning, beads of perfume evaporating into the air. Her boss's words burned on her mind: "You should strive for excellence." "Honestly, Sarah, I expect better." The disappointment churned her stomach into knots. This was precisely how she felt as a mother too, disheartened and riddled with self-doubt. The very thought of change felt distant, yet there was an urgent kindling beneath her fatigue she hadn't registered before. She scrolled through her phone again, her fingers hesitating over that tempting phrase: energy. Focus. Purpose. Could this morning routine really mark a turning point? Tentatively, she set her alarm for an hour earlier, whispering to herself that it was time to take control. At dawn, the fragmented shards of sleep hovered as she blinked and rose to the gentle caress of the morning light filtering through her window. Anxiety gnawed at her as she sank cross-legged onto the hardwood floor, thoughts racing faster than the morning train. Her breathing hitched, fingers like ice, failing to ground her. "I can do this," she willed herself, closing her eyes to picture clarity, a vibrant outlook where everything felt possible. But those dreams wilted in her reality. This routine made her question everything. What chaos lied ahead at the hospital, where her value was questioned with every glance from her boss? Sarah felt panic rise in her chest. Ripples of contempt nagged her whenever he observed her resilience turning into strength. Would she become a target? What if her kids, full of wonder and love, saw their mother quaking in fear of her job? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The tension fundamentally escalated, each whisper of potential confidence and echo losing its way in the narrow halls of her workplace. The fear of not being enough contorted her thoughts tighter than a noose. The very idea of self-assertion felt terrifying. Did she dare rise to the confrontation that loomed? As she contemplated her next visit to the hospital, the shadows of her boss's demeaning scrutiny loomed beside her like a specter. Confronting him could be career suicide, or it could ignite a fire within herself and perhaps others. As dread and defiance battled within her, Sarah stood perched between two worlds, the upholding of her duties wearing her down and the danger of claiming her voice. Each laugh from her kids echoed like a drumbeat, instilling a yearning for change and driving away the impulse to shrink back. Her heart raced, a wild rhythm of turmoil, as the uncertainty hung thick in the air, leaving her suspended between fear and the courage she so desperately needed. The shrill tone of her alarm clock tore through the silence, echoed by her own racing heart. Sarah forced herself from the cocoon of warmth that was her bed, shoving aside the blankets that felt heavier than lead. Today was the day she would confront the unresolved conflict, a stand she desperately needed to take, not just for herself, but for the sake of her children. With a sense of urgency, Sarah shuffled through her morning routine. Her body autopilot through brushing her teeth and washing her face, but her mind was already spiraling through the potential encounters awaiting her at the hospital. Each scenario played out like a grisly horror film: misunderstood intentions, patronizing remarks, criticism that could cut deeper than any surgical knife. Would she really find the strength to navigate these minefields? As she prepared breakfast, her children's laughter danced in the background. It was a melody that both lifted her spirits and gnawed at her anxiety. How could she shield her kids from the tumult swirling around her? The chaos of work seeped into her thoughts, dragging her into the depths of self-doubt. But those giggles, their unfiltered joy, were enough to remind her of her purpose. "Mommy, look at me," her youngest called, brandishing a crayon-scrawled birthday card for a friend. In that moment, Sarah felt a twinge of motivation flicker to life. She wasn't just a nurse battling workplace demons, she was their mother, capable of resilience. She had faced countless challenges before. This was just another one, albeit wrapped in fear and uncertainty. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," she exclaimed, her voice artificially light but imbued with genuine pride. The act of encouraging her children reignited a spark within her. If she could cultivate strength in them, who was to say they wouldn't inspire her right back? Driving to the hospital, the city blurred by, each stoplight creating a play of light and shadow across her thoughts. Clenching the steering wheel tightly, she felt the heft of expectation, the weight of being better, the insistent whispers of her boss's voice urging her to meet elusive standards. But as the traffic signal shifted to green, she resolved that today wouldn't be about him. It would be about her. Once inside the hospital, the buzz of activity surrounded her like an electric current. Nurses flitted about, patients spoke in hushed tones, and the machines beeped in monotonous rhythm. But Sarah felt stuck in a moment, a standstill against the frenetic pulse of healthcare. She paused to inhale deeply, channeling the routine she had just begun to forge, the grounding breaths, the focus on the present, transforming her nerves into a battlefield where courage might emerge victorious. With each step down the hall, a fire kindled in her belly, burning away the uncertainty. Today would not shy away from confrontation. The specter of her boss lingered, but now she visualized it shrinking, losing its power against her burgeoning resolve. Every stride turned into a conscious declaration. She was not merely maintaining appearances, she was proving her worth. As she entered the break room, the familiar sight of her colleagues assembled around the table greeted her. Muffled conversations ceased, eyeglasses were adjusted, and cups paused mid-air. All eyes turned to her, a moment suspended in time, and for a heartbeat, her strength faltered. Then, with the clarity she sought, Sarah balled her fists, summoning the courage she had built on those ordinary mornings. The internal battle had readied her for this. The air was laden with expectation, but it was a breeze she could navigate. "Can we talk?" she said, her voice firm yet laced with undertones of vulnerability. The room held its breath. The reality of this choice surged through her. This was the moment when her fears could either imprison her or grant her the freedom she craved. With each word, she felt the burden of doubt lift, fulfilling an untapped potential that had long been obscured by fear. Today, I won't back down, she thought, even as a ripple of unease washed over her. The confrontation awaited her. Would she find her footing or slip once more into the depths of despair? The stakes had never felt higher, and all she could do was leap forward into the unknown. The next words out of her mouth would change everything. The silence in the break room stretched, heavy with anticipation. Sarah's heart raced as she scanned the faces of her colleagues. She had taken the first step, but now what? Thoughts swirled like a tempest. Would they stand with her, or would she face the wrath of their judgments alone? "Sarah, is everything okay?" one of the nurses finally asked, her brows knit with genuine concern. The question hung in the air, laden with undesired weight. Yet, it trimmed the edge off Sarah's anxiety. This was it, her opening. "Actually, I wanted to address a few things that have been bothering me," Sarah began, her voice steadier than she felt. She had practiced this in her head, she had imagined the supportive nods, the understanding murmurs. But reality was a sharp contrast. "Lately, I felt overwhelmed by the expectations set upon us, not just from management, but within our own team dynamics. We're all here for our patients, and for each other. But when is it enough?" With each word, she felt the rhythm of her pulse steady, channeling a growing sense of empowerment. Uncertainty still lingered, but now it was met with a budding conviction. She had spent too long internalizing grievances, too long silencing her instincts. The atmosphere shifted slightly, some colleagues exchanged glances while others leaned in, intrigued. Honestly, it feels like we sometimes prioritize meeting quotas over quality care. I've seen how it affects morale and performance, she continued, her tone becoming more robust. The initial pangs of fear whispered at her but began to lose their grip. A nurse in the back shrugged nonchalantly, but we have to meet the standards. That's just how it is, right? Is it? Sarah challenged, meeting her gaze. Shouldn't we be more concerned about fostering a supportive environment rather than just meeting numbers? Maybe we could do better together if we communicated more openly. The air was thick with consideration, the serrated edges of dismissal softened. A spark of dialogue ignited. Slowly, others began to share their frustrations. Each voice adding layer upon layer, creating a tapestry of shared experiences and desires for change. Sarah felt exhilarated as her colleagues finally began to articulate what they had only dared murmur in hushed tones. As conversations flowed, Sarah seized the revelation this wasn't just about her fight, but a shared journey. The threads of her fear wove themselves into a fabric of hope and camaraderie. They spoke openly about burdens, echoing her sentiments of disappointment, fatigue, and the yearning for a more compassionate workflow. Sarah felt empowered, no longer standing alone on a tightrope of conflict. They could engage together, it was collective strength against the prevailing currents. Maybe we should propose a meeting with management? One nurse suggested, her face brightening. The thought ignited further discussion, should they compile a group to voice their concerns? The notion spiraled into a plan, and Sarah found herself at the heart of it. Her fear transmuted into a palpable resource. She was rallying the troops, igniting momentum. They could transform this workplace culture, mitigate the distress, and create a nurturing space for both patients and themselves. Suddenly, the thought of confronting her boss didn't seem quite as daunting, rather, it felt like a strategic mission, a crucial act of advocacy for herself and her team. As they exchanged ideas, a wave of warm collective energy enveloped them. Sarah's anxiety morphed into excitement, each sentence shared forging a stronghold against adversity. But just as she began to revel in this newfound resolve, the familiar figure loomed at the door, the face of authority she had dreaded facing. Her boss, with a look that signaled an impending storm, filled the entrance. The tide of hope she had surfed so confidently turned suddenly turbulent, the atmosphere shifted. Sarah, he said coolly, eyes narrowing, I need to speak with you. Now. The thrill of empowerment collided with the weight of reality, and Sarah felt her heartbeat quicken. This was a moment she had anticipated, yet could not have fully prepared for. Would she have the courage to stand firm against his scrutiny and advocacy for herself and her team? Or would the fear consume her once more? Her heart raced. Confrontation awaited. The stakes had risen, and now more than ever, clarity was essential. Would she rise to this challenge? The energy in the break room had pulsed with momentum until the moment her boss's presence shattered it. Sarah felt the walls of her resolve begin to close in, constricting her breath. Her colleagues' supportive murmurs faded from her consciousness, overshadowed by the authoritative gaze directed at her. She took a moment, grounding herself. This was pivotal. She could either retract into the safety of silence or confront the very authority that had kept her restrained. The uncertainty churned inside her, but beneath it simmered a fierce determination. Okay, Sarah thought, feeling warmth gathering in her chest. Instead of shrinking under scrutiny, she needed to own her position. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her posture and gestured for her boss to continue. Do you have any idea how detrimental your words in the break room could be? It undermines the very structure we've built here, he said, tension lacing his voice. She felt the familiar twinge of doubt but quelled it. With all due respect, the structure is what's failing us, she replied, her voice a calm whisper beneath the rising chaos of her thoughts. The environment you have fostered forces us to choose between quantity and quality. His eyes darkened, yet she pressed on. We have a responsibility to our patients, but we also owe it to ourselves to work in a supportive, encouraging atmosphere. I can no longer accept an existence where fear overrides our core values. His silence spoke volumes, a heavy pause where disbelief battled with irritation. She could sense the tightness in the air, her heart racing in synchrony with the rising tension. Every moment felt electrified, a boiling point where resolve met authority. Do you believe that you, as one nurse, can sway the entire team with these complaints? This isn't your private forum, he shot back, dismissive, but it only sparked a deeper fire within her. I don't expect to sway everyone. But I do know that each voice matters. She stood taller, conviction breaking through her earlier hesitations. I'm not just an employee who fulfills quotas, I'm a nurse who cares deeply about the patients and my colleagues. We need to nurture each other. That's how we thrive. The look on her boss's face was hard to decipher. Was it anger or merely an unexpected intrigue? Whatever it was, it twisted the tableau of their interaction. The power dynamics flickered as she realized she was no longer simply defending herself, she was advocating for a shared vision. You can't just challenge the status quo without consequences, Sarah, he warned, his tone now edged with an uncomfortable seriousness that sent sparks of fear coursing through her. What would those consequences entail? She countered defiantly, narrowing her eyes. Because I think the consequences of doing nothing are far greater. A charged silence lingered, and for the first time, Sarah saw a slight loosening of his grip. I'll consider what you've said. But remember that change doesn't come without its sacrifices, he replied finally, the harshness in his voice dulling. As he turned to leave, Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline. She had stood up, spoken out, and faced consequences head-on. The fear that had gripped her moments before started to dissipate, leaving behind an intoxicating taste of empowerment and agency. Reflecting on her confrontation, Sarah marveled at the strength she had tapped into, an empowerment she hadn't realized was within her grasp. The road ahead was still fraught with uncertainty, but she had taken a significant step into uncharted territory. As she returned to her colleagues, their faces mirrored a range of emotions: shock, admiration, maybe even trepidation. But she saw something else, sparked by her moment of courage, hope. They were inspired, and together, they could begin crafting their path forward. Did you really say all that? A nurse whispered, eyes wide. Yes, Sarah replied, feeling a new determination seep into her veins. And it's just the beginning. With her resolve renewed, she understood the upcoming team meeting with management was not just another meeting, it would be an opportunity to expand their conversation, to unite together under shared grievances and solutions. Yet, as Sarah prepared for the next phase of her advocacy, a shiver of trepidation flickered in the back of her mind. What other obstacles might she face from management? Would they stifle her voice or genuinely listen? Sarah couldn't shake the foreboding feeling that more dramatic confrontations lay ahead. The stakes were higher than she intended, and soon enough, she would have to summon every ounce of her newfound strength to endure whatever storm awaited. The clang of the bell signifying the start of the meeting reverberated through Sarah's chest as she entered the conference room, her mind racing with anticipation. She took a seat at the table's edge, positioning herself where she could gauge both her colleagues' expressions and the impending presence of management. It was a strategic choice, one that revealed her desire not only to listen but also to engage with the unfolding dynamics. As the rest of the team filtered in, Sarah could feel a palpable tension mixed with a new sense of purpose among them. They were no longer disjointed voices, they were unified, each carrying the weight of their grievances. She caught the eye of Isabel, a fellow nurse, who managed a small, reassuring smile, a silent acknowledgement that they were in this together. The shared glances reinforced Sarah's decision to lead the charge. As management filed in, the atmosphere shifted, a mixture of formality and underlying apprehension settling over the group. Sarah clenched her fists under the table, channeling the energy of the previous confrontation into a renewed sense of conviction. They were there to speak their truth and demand change. The meeting commenced, and the usual perfunctory updates paraded by, but Sarah's mind was elsewhere, strategizing her next move. She glanced around, her colleagues were engaged but also wary of the looming authority that had historically silenced their concerns. She knew she had to seize the moment. As the opportunity arose for questions, Sarah leaned into the discomfort and stood. I want to address the current working conditions and their impact not just on us, but also on our patients, she began, her voice steady. The words came out clear and determined, echoing heartbeats in the strained silence. It's not just about protocol, it's about compassion, she continued, drawing the attention of her boss and the senior management. We can't remain efficient and vigilant while we're exhausted and undervalued. This is not just a performance review, our patients are suffering. Murrows of concern rippled through the group, and she sensed resistance but also curiosity. Her colleagues leaned forward, catching the momentum she had ignited. The silence that enveloped the room felt charged with potential, and Sarah pressed on. We need real change, less focus on numbers and more on the people behind them. If creating a healthy work culture is a priority, we need concrete strategies and commitments from you, not just words. The sharp line of her boss's jaw tightened at her emphasis, but to Sarah's bewilderment, an unexpected flicker crossed his face. Was it recognition? For the first time, she saw the slightest acknowledgement of a crack in his facade, a moment where he seemed to grapple with the weight of her words. Her anxiety momentarily subsided, replaced by an exhilarating blend of fearlessness and hope. The dialogue took a turn as colleagues followed her lead, each raising their voices to share their own experiences. Sarah watched them reclaim their power, a wave of collective courage surging through the room. Yet, even as the discussion flourished, a shadow of doubt loomed over her thoughts. What repercussions might fall upon her after this audacious display? The fear of backlash clawed at the edges of her burgeoning resolve. As each pulse of camaraderie fueled her, another throb of apprehension whispered, had she pushed too far? As the meeting concluded, a sense of accomplishment filled the air, but Sarah's mind raced. They had made their point, but were they prepared for the inevitable pushback? Would she have the support she needed when facing the consequences, or would she find herself alone once again? In that moment, she understood, this was just the beginning. The confrontation she had so eagerly embraced was only the initial wave against an entrenched system. As she stepped out of the meeting room, a creeping urgency gripped her. She needed to prepare not just for the next meeting, but for the inevitable storm of conflict that awaited on the other side. A new determination sparked within her, yet fear lingered. How far would she need to go to ensure her voice remained heard when the dust finally settled? As Sarah exited the conference room, the echo of her own heartbeat was the only sound she could hear. The adrenaline that had propelled her through that pivotal moment began to wane, leaving behind a heady mix of excitement and trepidation. She'd taken a definitive stand, but now, as she walked through the sterile white halls of the hospital, the weight of the world seemed to settle on her shoulders. Would her colleagues truly rally behind her, or would the harsh reality of their positions undermine the unity they had just forged? She found herself in the break room, the familiar scent of brewed coffee mixing with the sharp antiseptic smell that clung to the building. It was a sanctuary of sorts, moments of solitude amidst the chaos of their work lives. Sarah gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white as she stared into the steaming cup before her. The reflection in the surface looked both determined and fragile. Her mind was a battlefield where her convictions battled her fears, each side pressing for dominance. With a sigh, she took a seat at the small table, feeling the need to regroup, strategize, and plan. The upcoming days would require her to strengthen her resolve. The stakes had risen, and Sarah knew she couldn't afford to let fear dictate her next moves. Her thoughts drifted to the various ways management might retaliate, subtle erasures of her contributions, sidelining her in future projects, perhaps even attempts to undermine her authority among her peers. No longer was she just a staff nurse, she had transformed into a figure of resistance, whether she was ready or not. Shaking off her dark thoughts, Sarah pulled out her notebook, the pages filled with notes and ideas, brainstorming ways to advocate for better working conditions. The night shift nurse MT's voice echoed in her ears from the meeting. We need to emphasize viable solutions, not just the problems. She recalled their meetings, the discussions on nurse-to-patient ratios, the endless hours, the sense of burnout spreading like a virus among the team. What could they propose that would not only address their grievances but would also resonate with management, who were often unmoved by emotional pleas? She began to jot down concrete suggestions, proposals for staffing adjustments, mandatory breaks, even sustainable wellness programs. Each point was meticulously crafted. Sarah realized that she'd developed a knack for problem solving. The weighty issues that at first seemed insurmountable now felt more manageable as possibilities. This unexpected capability was a revelation, another layer to her evolving identity. Realizing this lifted her spirits, if only slightly, and she began fully committing to her role as a change agent. It was heartening that she could contribute meaningfully despite deep-seated fatigue. As she put the pen down, the clarity of her mission began to shine through the fog of doubt. But beneath her newfound optimism lay an unsettling awareness: who would support her when the tide turned? Sarah glanced at the clock, the time slipping away faster than she anticipated. She needed to regroup with her allies, keep the momentum alive, and delineate next steps. Yet as she rose from the table, a wave of uncertainty washed over her. What if she was overstepping? What if she continued to dredge up a conflict that might further isolate her and her colleagues? They already struggled for recognition and acknowledgement of their hard work. Would they truly maintain their collective bravery in the face of potential backlash? Taking a deep breath, Sarah squared her shoulders as she exited the break room, the path forward ahead still uncertain, yet marked with promise. Soon, she would have to confront not just management but also the silent figures of skepticism within her team. The challenge loomed, compelling her to strengthen her own voice while forging connections. What are you willing to risk to make a difference? She whispered to herself, feeling the weight of that question settle in the pit of her stomach. She moved forward, heart racing, ready to engage in a new round of discussions, but wondering how far she was willing to push the boundaries of her own comfort. As she approached the nurse's station, the buzz of conversation surrounded her, and a sense of purpose surged within. She wasn't alone in this fight, but even more than that, something deeper was beginning to awaken in her: a fierce resolve that demanded action in the face of adversity. But amid the newfound strength, lingering questions remained. Would her allies truly rally to her cause, or would they falter under pressure? The need for unity felt more pressing than ever, and as Sarah stood ready to lead with empathy and logic, she wondered who would rise with her when the first real pushback occurred. Sarah stood at the nurse's station, the noise of her colleagues blending into a distant hum as she tried to gather her thoughts. She watched the interactions around her, noting which nurses exchanged encouraging nods and which ones offered only fleeting glances. Trust and solidarity were fragile beasts, easily toppled by fear or insecurity. What was she truly asking of them? Would her quest for better conditions be a collective ambition or a source of further division? She snapped her notebook shut, resolve solidifying in her chest. To lead effectively, she needed not only to propose change but also to weave a narrative that could inspire those around her. It wasn't enough to write down suggestions; she must speak with passion, drawing her team into the vision of a healthier workplace. But would they believe her? Seeking input, Sarah approached Nora, an experienced nurse known for her wisdom and steady demeanor. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty that swirled inside. Nora raised an eyebrow but nodded, leading Sarah to a quieter corner where the chatter faded into a background buzz. "What's on your mind?" Taking a breath, Sarah laid out her ideas for improvement and the importance of collective action. "I think we can propose a staffing review and wellness programs, but we need to stand together. Otherwise, they'll see us as individuals trying to stir up trouble, not as professionals with legitimate concerns." Nora listened intently, absorbing the weight of Sarah's words. "It's a big risk, Sarah. The last time someone stepped up, it didn't end well. We got pushed aside, and those who could helped us didn't want to stick their necks out." "I know," Sarah replied, swallowing hard. "But if we stay silent, nothing will change. Shouldn't we at least try to advocate for our own well-being?" Nora's expression softened, revealing her inner conflict. "I get it. I really do. But we need to be meticulous. If you want my support, you'll have to show me how this will benefit not just us, but the hospital itself. We need management to understand that improved conditions will lead to better patient care." They continued to discuss strategies, slowly building a mutual understanding. By the time they finished, Sarah felt lighter, emboldened to approach others with her thoughts. But the nagging doubt remained. Would they have the courage to align their interests with hers, or would she face resistance from those who had seen their efforts backfire in the past? As the day wore on and her shift progressed, Sarah observed her team more closely. She detected a subtle tension among certain members, a quiet resignation that hinted at exhaustion and fear. With each passing hour, she considered how best to frame their cause, planning to highlight both the human and professional aspects of their situation. That evening, a new element of dread crept into her mind. She would need to face not just the administration, but also the very real possibility of betrayal from within her ranks. The spectrum of trust was shifting beneath her feet, fragile and uncertain. Exhausted but determined, Sarah gathered her notes. Soon, there would be a meeting where she intended to speak on their behalf. Her heart raced at the thought, a mixture of excitement and fear. The stakes had never been higher, but the potential change was exhilarating. The outline of her speech became clearer in her mind as she practiced the words, hoping to penetrate the layers of skepticism she feared would greet her. As she prepared to leave for home, she overheard snippets of a conversation that sent chills down her spine. Other nurses were whispering about recent changes in management's approach, hinting at potential cutbacks. It struck fear into her heart. What if their jobs were on the line if she pushed too hard? Sarah stopped dead in her tracks, mind racing. Would her attempts to promote better conditions lead to more harm than good? Would it paint a target on their backs? If she chose to push forward with her plans, could she gain the necessary support, or would she find herself alone in her fight? With that thought circling her mind, she stepped outside into the cool night air, the weight of her ambition wrapped tightly around her. She was on the edge, standing between fighting for change and the threat of losing everything. Determined to emerge stronger, she braced herself for the conversations ahead that would shape the course of her mission. The real question loomed larger now: would she be able to convert her deep concerns into a rallying cry, or would doubt stifle the flames of her convictions before they had the chance to burn brightly? It was time to step into the arena, and she couldn't afford to falter. Doubt clung to Sarah as she stepped into the hospital the next morning. The air felt heavy with unspoken fears, like a storm waiting to break. She took a deep breath, determined to not let trepidation overshadow her purpose. Each step toward the nurse's station reminded her of the conversation she intended to have, the message she sought to solidify. As she set her bag down, Sarah scanned the bustling hallway for familiar faces. She wanted to engage her colleagues, feed off their energy while radiating her intent. But as she made eye contact with a few of them, they quickly looked away. The scene was a stark reminder of the fractures forming amongst them, various threads of anxiety weaving themselves into the fabric of their work environment. After taking a moment to compose herself, she gathered her notes, mind racing with potential talking points. She had envisioned approaching her colleagues with a clear strategy, emphasize not just the immediate benefits of their shared advocacy but also the long-term implications for patient care that those in charge undoubtedly cared about. Nora approached, her expression a blend of concern and encouragement. "Ready for today?" she inquired, her voice steady but low. "Not quite," Sarah admitted, feeling the weight of those lingering fears. "I feel like I'm about to plunge into deep water without knowing how to swim." "You need to remember that swimming is a skill you learn by jumping in," Nora replied, her eyes steady. "Just keep in mind why you're doing this. The moment you doubt, look back at that reason." With a deep sigh, Sarah nodded. She rehearsed some affirmations in her mind, grounding her thoughts back to the goal laid out before her. It wasn't just about change, it was about a culture shift, a wave of empowerment rippling through the team aiming toward a collective vision of care and compassion. The morning passed in a blur of activity. Charting, responding to calls, and brief interactions with colleagues filled the hours until it was time to gather. The meeting room buzzed with anticipation and unease as the nurses filed in, their expressions revealing an array of uncertainties. Taking her place at the front, Sarah felt her heart race as she opened her notes, fingers trembling slightly on the paper. "I appreciate everyone coming today," she began, voice steadying with every word. "I know many of us have concerns about our working conditions and the potential cutbacks. We can't simply wait for change to come, we have to advocate for it ourselves." Murmurs filled the room, skepticism flickering in the air. She pressed on, wielding her points like a sword. "Better staffing isn't just a preference, it's essential for patient safety. If we push for a formal review, management will see we mean business. But we need to stand together, to support one another." A younger nurse named Mia raised her hand, her brow furrowed with worry. "What if management sees us as a threat? I've heard rumors they're not considering our input seriously." This was the moment Sarah had braced for, the pivotal moment where she could either confront fear head-on or falter. "The risk of speaking out is a heavy one," she acknowledged. "But what's more dangerous is remaining silent. If they don't see our concerns as valid, we risk losing our voices entirely. We owe it to ourselves and our patients to take that leap. The tension began to shift as a few nods of agreement spread through the room. Sarah felt a flicker of hope igniting, but self-doubt threatened to extinguish it. Would they heed her call, or would hesitation seal their fates? After the meeting, she discussed strategies with Nora and others who seemed willing to support her vision, but the weight of those who remained silent lingered in her mind, spreading unease. As she wrapped up her thoughts with Nora later that day, deep in conversation about potential next steps, her phone buzzed with a notification. A message from an anonymous source came through, chilling her to the bone. If you keep pushing too hard, you won't like what happens next. Heart racing, Sarah's earlier resolve faltered for just a moment. The dark undertone of the message left her questioning whether her ambitions would ultimately lead to personal harm, becoming not just a risk to her colleagues' livelihoods but to her own. What had she awakened? As adrenaline pulsed through her veins, a conflict brewed within, forcing her to confront the possible consequences of her choices. She realized she was fully invested now, teetering on the precipice of a fight she might not be prepared to face. What would her next move be? Would she push through the fear, or would she retreat, saving herself at the expense of her vision? The moment loomed. Each decision would carve her path toward either redemption or ruin. The morning light filtered through Sarah's window, casting a soft glow on her frayed notes scattered around the kitchen table. Anxiety coiled in her stomach like a snake, her mind raced with the implications of the anonymous threat. She hadn't realized that seeking change could provoke a backlash, even a potentially dangerous one. Benched by self-doubt, she scrolled repeatedly through her messages, wondering if the sender knew something she didn't. After a restless night, she understood that she could no longer afford hesitation. It was now or never. If she wanted to cultivate the courage she spoke of in the meeting, she had to embrace the fear creeping into her thoughts. She prepared her favorite breakfast, a meager attempt to ease her mounting tension, fixed on the notion of clarity. I can't back down now. The hospital loomed ahead as she approached. Determined to face the day, she squared her shoulders and reminded herself of the reasons behind her activism. Every second spent in this hospital wasn't just about meeting quotas or ensuring compliance, it was about advocating for vulnerable patients who relied on their expertise and compassion. At the nurse's station, Nora greeted her, vibrant and ready. Did you think more about what we discussed? I did, Sarah said, steeling herself. But I want to gauge our colleagues' reactions further. The message was met with mixed feelings last time. We need more than just willingness, we need a robust plan. Nora smiled faintly. A plan requires risk, Sarah. Are you ready to take that leap? The question clawed at Sarah's certainty. What if I'm not? Sometimes the leap is what helps us discover our wings. Nora's words were simple, yet they pierced the fog of her doubt. It was time to cultivate her authenticity, to be transparent not just with her colleagues but also with herself. As the day progressed, Sarah engaged in conversations that filled the air with ideas. She asked colleagues for their thoughts about obstacles they faced and how they believed change could be implemented. For every concern and fear expressed, she validated it, sharing her own apprehensions to create an atmosphere of openness. Gradually, their reticence ebbed away, replaced by constructive dialogue. Amidst this new energy, Sarah felt a flicker of something exciting: collaboration. Empowered by the shared struggles laid bare, she began sketching out a concrete proposal. They discussed a petition for management, a means to unify their voices clearly and formally. One by one, colleagues signed on, bolstered by the feeling of solidarity that rippled through the group. Sarah's heart swelled as she realized they were no longer mere individuals, they were a collective force. At the end of the day, it was time for introspection. Stripped of the noise of the world, Sarah sat in her car, contemplating her next moves. But the brief sense of victory was shattered when her phone buzzed again, this time with another anonymous message: "You've made enemies. Be careful who you trust." An avalanche of fear swept through, urging her to reconsider her approach. How deep was this web of rivalry? Who could she trust? The prospect of losing everything sent adrenaline surging through her veins again. Sarah clenched the steering wheel, caught in the iron grip of duality between striving for what was right and saving herself from potential backlash. Realization seeped in. She wasn't just nurturing an idea, she was diving deeper into a murky underbelly that few had dared to explore. This battle would demand every ounce of her resilience and ingenuity, and there would be no turning back. The stakes were higher than she had anticipated. The air in the car thickened with uncertainty as she lingered on those unsettling words. It was her moment to confront those shadows lurking in silence. What was she truly willing to endure for the sake of change? A decision loomed, a chance to reshape her path lay before her. But would she fortify her resolve and carry on, or would fear dictate her next move? The clock was ticking, and the answers would soon reveal themselves. The sun rose brightly the next morning, illuminating the kitchen where Sarah stood, contemplating her next steps. The echoes of yesterday's fears still resonated in her mind. Each anonymous message had awakened uncertainties she thought she could conquer. Yet, despite the churn of anxiety, something remarkable had taken root within her, a fierce resolve to fight for change, not just for herself, but for her colleagues and the patients who relied on them. Today marked the day she would tread carefully into the complexities of workplace dynamics while waging her own campaign for better conditions. As she poured her morning coffee, Sarah reflected on the resilience that had burgeoned within her through this arduous journey. She could no longer afford to back down. Progress required courage, and today, she was ready to face whatever awaited her. In the hospital, the steady pulse of daily life hummed around her, each beat reminding her of why she was there. Nurses exchanged quick banter, patients' voices filled the corridors, and the demanding responsibilities loomed large. Yet underneath it all, Sarah felt an undercurrent of unity start to build among her colleagues. They had become a collective force, and this morning felt like the calm before a transformative storm. After the morning briefing from management concluded, Sarah took a deep breath and ventured towards the nurses' lounge, her baseline for discussion and advocacy. As she entered, the familiar faces of her colleagues greeted her with cautious optimism. They had gathered, not as individuals but as a united group ready to tackle the core issues plaguing their work environment. Gathered around a table, Sarah began, the strongest conviction fueling her words. I know many of us face a range of fears regarding the unknown, but we cannot let that deter us from what we truly need, an environment where both our patients and we can thrive. In response, the room began to hum, nods of agreement flowing like currents. Sarah's message resonated. She could see the glimmers of hope and recognition flickering in her colleagues' eyes. We are collectively empowered, and our voices deserve to be heard by management, Sarah continued, emboldened by the enthusiasm around her. Let us create a strategy, a petition reflecting our concerns, aiming for actionable change. We can outline the impact of our working conditions on patient care, how better staffing translates directly to better outcomes. A nurse spoke up, her voice strong. You know what? I've seen firsthand how overloaded we are, and it's affecting our patients. This matters. Another chimed in, let us do it. If we present a united front, they can't ignore us anymore. Encouraged by the enthusiasm, Sarah felt the fear of potential backlash fade into the background. They worked fervently, drafting a clear yet impactful petition itemizing their demands. Striking a balance between data and emotional appeals became essential, something that Sarah and the group orchestrated well together. The storm brewing for better work conditions transformed into a strategic rally for empathy and progress, fortified by their shared stories. As the meeting concluded with affirmations and a shared commitment to sign and present the petition to management, a wave of accomplishment enveloped Sarah. No longer was she just a nurse feeling powerless under someone's thumb, she was a leader motivated by the collective well-being of her colleagues. Stepping into her shift that evening, Sarah was met by whispered conversations. Others who had remained skeptical were now buzzing with excitement and curiosity. There was a shared understanding that a new chapter had begun. The room pulsed with anticipation. Later that evening, Sarah was bombarded by a mix of support and apprehension. They expressed both enthusiasm for the movement but also voiced concerns about the potential ramifications. What if they retaliate? One nurse asked practically. Sarah paused, her thoughts trailing back to the messages of warning she had received. I know fear is valid, she affirmed, standing taller than she'd ever felt. But we are in this together. We have to risk confronting management. But if we do this as a team, we can create a wave of positive change. The growing foundation of trust between them felt electric, they were all rallying behind a common cause. Together, they advanced towards something more significant: empowerment and agency. Once outside the meeting, Sarah and her allies gathered for a moment of solidarity. Each signed the petition, a tangible representation of their united aspirations. As the last signature was added, a wave of euphoria surged through them. With each pen stroke, they transcended their individual fears, they became advocates for their community at large. Days later, they would present this petition to management, but for now, Sarah soaked in the satisfaction of knowing she had transformed her journey of doubt into a foundation of purpose. She had become an architect of influence rather than a victim of circumstance. That night, as she settled into bed, the weight of uncertainty had faded. She understood the stakes were high, but so were their ambitions. It was time once more to step boldly into the arena, prepared for any outcome. Sarah awoke the next day, irrevocably changed, the champion for what mattered most. Gone was the whispering voice of self-doubt, replaced instead with a fierce sense of purpose. She was ready not just to face management but to continue to lead with conviction, turning fear into momentum, striving for a future where every nurse could operate freely, compassionately, and with the highest professional standards. Now, for anyone trapped in a cycle of doubt and fear, Sarah's journey highlights the truth: you must stand tall, seize your voice, and advocate for your worth. The time for whispered concerns is over, it's time to articulate your needs with courage and conviction. Subscribe immediately to this channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire personal transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm so others can discover these messages. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Sarah's journey and the impact of unity in the workplace. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how courage can lead to remarkable change. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of this channel's mission.